Travels of the Ellis Arbor is a TTRPG story set in the world of Bastion using the Vagrant Sun campaign setting. Tune in for episode 40, Pupils. All that stood between Darian and victory was the pull of his trigger. Yet something lingered in his mind, something disturbing, unnerving, and even foreboding. For all his confidence and guile, he could not place this feeling that kept him in that moment. A moment of fear. Their race to find Nout had led them here, to conflict with this nefarious band of rogues. Why now did the villain choose to reveal itself? Darian could not help but think that the Lady of Blood had led him here to this purpose. That she, once again, would force his hand, leading him to slay some aberration or fiend that wished to break the circle of life and death. Darian's mind continually turned to Nout, his crewman, navigator, and friend. They were here to find Nout above all else. And though the lady bid him find and slay Nout, his truest desires were that of his safety and return. The fact that this human, riddled with crystals and arcana, was a more pressing threat to him now than the loss of Nout seemed oddly arbitrary. Why did fate deem that he be placed here? Turning his eyes to those embedded crystals, he could see Nout's handiwork displayed. His articulated, etheric devices were of the highest quality, able to sever and fuse material with the utmost finesse. And as the prolonged moments before firing his gun continued, even the clear scarification of flesh against gleaming blue gemstones could be considered aesthetically impressive by Nout's standards. Candidly, it occurred to him. For all his doubts, he'd not considered that this path that he and his crew took here could be anything but a machination of his occult patron. But now, as bright as the sun upon the deck of his esteemed vessel, he saw his purpose, clearer than ever. The Lady of Blood did not lead him here. Nout did. Of one thing he was certain, Nout meant for the crew to come into contact with this marvelous band. He meant for Darian to spy his handiwork, and he meant for Darian to meet them in battle. Of course, the distractions, the sabotage, and this perfectly choreographed moment. And like a dance set to a new tempo, Darian, Moore, Edward, and Carpathian enacted the routine. Like an explosion of hot metal, Darian fired, point blank into the masked rogue's stomach. The bullet screamed out of his leather jacket with a spray of crimson, enough to offer a moment of confusion. As Moore rose to their full, enraged height, the masked rogue was flung backwards onto the floor. Though electricity burst from his wound, he slammed into the stone with all the grace of a tumbling boulder. Edward turned from behind his cover, aiming his rifle once more into the catwalk. The lightning arced from the articulated chamber, scoring the rafters and the armed rogues with them. A few fired blank rounds into the air, while other pistols clicked in frustration. This time, instead of fire, Carpathian prepared a tumultuous gust of wind, sending many of the rogues toppling off the catwalk railing, falling hard on the floor below. Their retaliation was impetuous. As they fired blindly into the chamber, Darian hoped their defenses would be substantial enough. Nonetheless, two scored the outside of his vest, while another caught him in the shoulder. A volley of fire caught Moore unprepared, scoring their timber-like flesh, only adding to their tempestuous rage. But for all their hail of bullets, the rogues were met with despair. With two great fists of arboreal strength, Moore brought their full weight upon the masked rogue, crushing him utterly under their myconid might. A sickly, cracking sound, as the lightning paired with the shattering of ribs and collarbones. A sharp cry of pain, and the rogue's leader was no more. With 3 bullets still remaining in his barrel, Darian spun to meet the eyes of a ramshackle, disparaged, and agape band of rogues. One by one, as the band faced their defeat, they slung their weapons to the ground. Some flew the sight entirely, hobbling away with burnt skin and broken fingers, each with their hands raised and willing to accept defeat. After all, their magic-bound leader was utterly no match for the crew. What good would rallying do? As the dust settled, more stood back over the body, surveying for any signs of life. A rasped breath, and a dry cackle later, the masked rogue held but a scrap of consciousness. The porcelain visage of his mask cracked, tearing away to reveal what remained of his featureless face. "Say not that I disparaged. I know when I'm beaten. I've seen death take greater men than I." A cough of blood and an unholy breath, followed by the whispered, barely audible ramble that followed. "One doesn't go lightly into dangers such as this without knowledge of the costs. There's more that you don't know about Chester's marvelous band. We are so numerous, we will one day blot out the sun. For every arm of our organization, there is one who bears the power of every demon of the pit." Darian turned to face this broken figure. He watched as light continued to hum from the blue gemstones, making it a task to even understand his remarks. "They teach us. We learn. You might think us pupils to a divine teacher. The eyes of a being that has 1,000 arms, enough to carry the world. But even if you were to blind every eye of the beast, the many thousands of reaching, clawing arms could engulf the world. Tear at its foundations. Claw at the destinies of countless heroic figures." And as the gems continued to hum, the crew could see the arcs of lightning carrying up and outward toward the exterior of the figure's limbs, burning them, scarring them, and turning them to ash. "Take your victory with you. Find your friend. You'll need it." Slowly, and with a strange sense of acceptance, the masked figure burned away in the crackle of blue lightning, leaving only ashen remains. Finally, clattering to the floor, all that remained were 4 blue gemstones, warm and warbling with power. Even with their victory assured, the night brought with it its dangers. The scattering of screaming rogues and the rattling sound of gunfire had alerted the town to their presence. Even now, the crew could make out the sound of shouts coming from adjacent roads. The Denea's mere guard were quick to subdue the fleeing rogues, and the rogues were quick to speak on the existence of their conquerors. The crew must act fast should they wish to flee unscathed. Edward vaulted toward the underground tunnel entrance, taking as much stray ammunition as he could carry. Moore's form returned to that of a smaller, humanoid visage, grabbing at plates, bowls, and boxes of food, toddling down the corridor after Ed. Carpathian bent down toward the ash of what remained of their foe, taking a small handful into a vial and collecting each of the gemstones that adorned him. Though they were still hot to the touch, he pocketed them before continuing toward the exit. Giving his command, Darian waited a moment longer, trying to shake the feeling of having accomplished something quite impressive. Somehow, Nout had manufactured their victory. For all his insight, the captain could not grapple with Nout's methods. Till finally, his senses snapped back into the moment, realizing he too must make for the exit. not before grabbing at the pile of evidence they'd acquired on Nout and vaulting into the hidden entrance behind his crew. Countless perilous minutes passed as the crew heard the authorities above. They turned over every table, crate, and cabinet, scouring for the victors of the night. Their shouts served to drown out the quiet shuffle and the slosh of sewer water as the crew made it further and further from the entrance. They waited, through the night, confident in their own skill to evade capture. As they hid, Darian's focus returned to the papers, coiled up in his pocket. Again, he flipped through them, this time searching for anything that alluded to Goblin or the existence of a marvelous band. What caught his eye was interesting indeed. In all the accounts of Nout, their informant spoke of a creature that had dealings with a marvelous band, rising through the ranks to a position of authority. Where the notes spoke on a goblin, however, they told a very different tale. As the pages read, a goblin had been sighted in the Denaesmere marketplace, clutching at an array of crystals in one hand and with a polished steel shield in the other. It spoke on how they effortlessly evaded capture at the hands of the authorities, fleeing to the east. The patrol followed them to the edge of town, watching as they scurried toward the eastern tip of the Kobolite Keeps, toward the forests and the coast beyond. Though they surged well into the night, the goblin vanished without a trace. Folding the note into his pocket once more, Darian whispered to his crew as they hid.
Get your rest, friends. We've still a long journey ahead. I feel as though Nout has barely begun his wild chase.
Did you find something? Has our informant given you a clue how to find Nout? At this, Darian smirked.
Of a sort. I think it'd be more accurate to say that Nout is leading us by the nose on whatever wayward journey he finds himself on.
Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Special thanks to new and existing patrons, including Jared Rose, Rob Jenkin, AJ Torres, Jade Ranson, Reese Shelmadine, Nathan Ebley, and Alex von Hostrit. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure to follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/lonomy. Don't forget, take care of each other.